Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to Holy Sunday, and I'm going to keep reading you passages from a little slim book called City of God. And last week, I read a passage about how Augustine's talking about Noah's Ark and how it symbolizes Christ and the church and whatever. But I'm moving on to the next little bit I want to read, and that is called "The Account of the Flood." Is neither merely historical nor purely allegorical. So we'll see what St. Augustine has to say about that. So here it is. No one ought to imagine, however, that this account was written for no purpose, or that are here to look solely for a reliable historical record without any allegorical meaning, or conversely, that those events are entirely unhistorical and the language purely symbolical, or whatever may be the nature of the story, it has no connection with prophecy about the church. Surely it is only a twisted mind that would maintain that books which have been so I can't say the word, preserved for thousands of years, which have been a safeguard by such a concern, for so well ordered a transmission to which such books are written without serious purpose, or that we should consult them simply for historical facts. For to take one point only, if it was a large number of animals that compelled the building of the ark of such great size, why was it necessary to embark 2 of each unclean species and 7 of each clean kind? Both clean and unclean could have preserved by the same number. Or are we really suppose that God, who ordered the preservation so as to renew their species, had not the power to recreate them in the same way as he had first created them? Now there are those who maintain that the accounts of the floods is not historical, but simply a collection of symbols and allegories. They maintain in the first place that it is impossible for so fast a flood to happen, and with the water rose to a level of 15 cubits above the highest mountains. The evidence being alleged fact, the clouds cannot gather above the top of Mount Olympus, because the atmosphere there is already so high that the denser air is lacking, in which winds, clouds, and rains originate. It escapes their notice that earth, the densest of all elements, could not exist there, or that they are going to deny that the summit of a mountain is formed of earth? If not, why do they admit that earth is allowed to reach such high levels in the atmosphere, and yet maintain that some possibility is not open to the waters? And yet those who measure and weigh the elements inform us that waters rise higher and weighs less than earth. What rational argument then do you put forward to explain why earth, a heavier and lower element, should have intruded yet into region of the serener atmosphere during the revolutions of so many years? If water, a lighter and higher element, has not permitted to do so, even for inconsiderable time. It is also said that the ark of the dimensions described cannot have contained so many species of animals of both sexes, 2 of each species of the unclean and 7 of each of the clean. They appeared to reckon only 300 cubits in length and 50 in width, without taking into account that their equal amount of space on the higher and on the highest level, so that the measurements are multiplied by 3, making 900 cubits by 150. We may also bear in mind the clever suggestion contributed by Origen. He points out that Moses, the man of God, was, according to the scriptures, versed in all the learnings of the Egyptians, who were addicted to geometry, and therefore Moses may have meant great geometrical cubits, of which is alleged to be 6 equal of ours. If that suggestion were adopted, it would be clear to anyone that the ark of such size would have immense capacity. Sorry, I can't say that word. As for the argument that the ark of such an enormous size cannot have been constructed, this is misrepresentation, and most of the unconvincing one. For they know that the immense cities have been built, and they fail to notice the hundreds of years that were spent in fabrication of the ark. Now, it is possible for stones to adhere together, cemented merely by lime, and to make encircling wall so many miles long, and we are supposed to make it impossible that timber should be joined together by pegs, bolts, nails, and bituminous glue, to frame the ark extending in length and breadth and strength, not curved lines. This ark would not require launching into the sea by human effort, but would be raised by the water when it arrived, owing to natural difference in specific gravity, and it would be steered by divine providence when it was afloat, instead by human vigilance, to keep it from shipwreck wherever it went. Then there is a problem consistently suggested by the excessively minute minute, sorry. It concerns that the tennis creatures, not only such creatures as mice and newts, but also such as locusts, beetles, and even flies and fleas, the questions raised whether they could not have been present in the ark in the greater numbers than the limit set when God gave the command. We must begin by pointing out those who are puzzled on the point that the things which crawl on the earth, are to be taken in the meaning in which is not necessary to preserve the ark of its creatures, able to live in the waters, and this would include, besides the fishes, other submerged creatures, those that swim on the surface, for instance, many of the birds again. The words they shall be male and female are surely and understood as referring to the need to renew the species, and so it's not necessary to have the ark of those creatures which can be produced without sexual intercourse from various substances, or from the decomposition of substances. Or if they were in the ark, as they were generally present in houses, they could not have been there without the fixing of a defined number. On the other hand, a mystery of the highest solemnity was being enacted here, a symbol presentation of a reality of the greatest importance, and that it may be that it could not be adequately conveyed by the historical event unless all the creatures which were unable through their natural limitations to maintain life in the waters were there in the ark and in the fixed number. If so, this could not be the responsibility of the particular man or men, but of God. In fact, Noah did not catch the animals, and he did not put them in. He let them in, and they came and entered. That is not the force of the words, they will come to you. Not to be sure, though man's driving, but God's abiding. But then is an exception, where we surely not to suppose that the sexless creatures were included, since they are definitely laid down that they shall be male and female. There are, we know, some animals which are produced from various substances without sexual intercourse, but afterwards reproduce by intercourse. Flies are an example of this. There are many others, such as bees, which have no distinction of male and female. Then again, there are animals which show sexual characteristics without producing offspring, such as female and male mules. It would be surprising if they were in the ark instead. It would have been enough for their parents there. It was the species of horse and ass, and the same in true any other animal which produce some different kind of creature by interbreeding. But if such hybrids had anything to contribute the allegorical meaning of the ark, then they would be included, for such a species also has male and female. Some people are puzzled about the kinds of food that would have been available in the ark for animals, which are supposed to be purely carnivorous. They speculate whether were the animals taken in excesses or prescribed number, without transgressing a command, since their inclusion would have been compelled by their need to feed on the others, on whether they are on whether there um, could have been some foodstuffs other than meat which were suitable for all animals. We know, in fact, many carnivorous animals feed on vegetables and fruit, especially figs and chestnuts. Thus, it will not be surprising that the wise and righteous man was also instructed by God about the appropriate food for each species and prepared a store of meatless food adapted for various animals. Is there anything which we would refuse to eat under the commandment of hunger, compulsion of hunger? Is there anything that God could not render agreeable and wholesome? He could indeed have endowed these creatures with the ability to live without food, and this would have been easy for his divine power. Had it not been for their eating played its part in completing the allegorical representation of so many a mystery, in the fact only a love of disposition would allow anyone to contend that the elaborate details of the historical narrative are not symbols designed to give the prophet picture of the church. For nations have already filled the church, and the clean and the unclean are contained as well as in the framework of the church's unity. Until the appointed end is reached, the meaning is so abundantly clear, on this particular point, that we must never think about doubting the other details that have their own meanings, although the language is rather more obscure than the references less easy to recognize. This being so, no one, however stubborn, will venture to imagine that this narrative has written without the ulterior purpose, until it cannot possibly be said that the events through historical have no symbolic meaning, or that the account is not factual, but merely symbolical, or that the symbolism has nothing to do with the church. No, we must believe that the writing of the historical record had a wise purpose, that the events are historical, and they have a symbolic meaning, and that is a meaning that gives a prophetic picture of the church. Now that this book has arrived at this point, I must bring to a close. My next task will be to examine the development of both cities, that is, which an earthly city, which lives in man's standards, and of the heavenly city, which lives according to God's will, and is a period following the flood, and thereafter in the following periods of history. So we did go in a bit there, but yeah, that's what Augustine had to say about Noah's flood. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. It's very interesting. But yeah, thank you so much for watching BookTube, and I will see you next time.